Welcome, welcome, CNU!
Woo!
Glad you all finally made it here to Boston, a couple hours late, but right on time for absolutely gorgeous weather. And we have one heck of a bike tour planned for you all. Rolling out, turning left.
So for those that didn't hear, this building is the old State House. It's the old seat of government in the colonial era. You can see the unicorn and the lion, the symbols of British royalty. That balcony is the first place in the country that the Declaration of Independence was read to the public. And where those people are standing right in front is the site of the Boston Massacre. And there's transit in the basement now. So this intersection has a lot of the important eras of Boston all here. Colonial, the kind of Gilded Age building here, and then you can see all the skyscrapers as well, representing the progress of the 20th century. So you can see here on the left the Orange Line entrance in the basement of the old State House. Probably not something that you could get through the Historical Architectural Board these days, but good thing we got it done before that was an issue. So Washington Street in the colonial era was called Orange Street, and these were really the two most important streets in Boston. That's why they put the seat of government here. You had King Street, now called State Street, that goes to the port, and Orange Street was the street that took you out Boston Neck. Remember, originally Boston was built on a peninsula so that it was easily defendable.
These are the Blue Line buses.
Oh, yeah.
Blue Line shut down.
Yeah. They had the blue and the orange down last weekend.
Oh, yeah.
So up ahead on our right, you're gonna see City Hall and City Hall Plaza, a beloved but controversial City Hall building in the brutalist style. Some people love it, some people hate it. As you can tell from a lot of my narration, I'm an appreciator not just of Boston's bike lanes, but Boston's history. So please indulge us as we do a little historical tour at the same time that we're talking about bike infrastructure. This is Cambridge Street here, called Cambridge Street because it's a street that goes to Cambridge. Very creative. So the Cambridge Street bike lane that we're on here is a great example of progress that's been made in Boston in the last 3 or 4 years. And we give a lot of credit to our current mayor, Michelle Wu, for being a champion for this kind of infrastructure and making some tough political calls to get things like this done. This is a really vital bicycle corridor between downtown Boston and Cambridge, including Kendall Square, which is a huge job area, but then lots of residential past that in Cambridge and Somerville. Takes you right to the Longfellow Bridge, one of the key links over the Charles River. We're gonna go over that in a minute. Cambridge Street is also kind of the dividing line between the West End and the Mass General Hospital complex on the north side here to my right, and Beacon Hill to my left, which is one of the original 3 hills of Boston and the site of the current State House and state government. So the The MBTA's blue line, which carries maybe 100,000 people a day, is down today, and so it's been replaced with buses, which is why we're seeing more buses than normal. All these yellow buses that actually say blue line on them are examples of that.
Interesting. Okay.
Up on our right here is the Old West Church, which is also maybe just post-colonial era church and kind of the anchor of the neighborhood in the West. The West End was unfortunately the victim of urban renewal in the 1950s and 60s that flattened a traditional neighborhood and kind of built a set of government and residential buildings that are underwhelming compared to what was there before.
All right, don't be shy. Pack in close. Closer you are, easier it is to hear me, easier it is to see all the bike infrastructure. What's left of it. All right, so congratulations, everyone. You have all survived the sketchiest part of this tour. Now, why was this last part of the tour particularly sketchy? Well, it's because the blue line, one of our subway lines, is currently having a shutdown, so a lot of buses are occupying bike lanes as shuttle replacement service. We love our trains, even when they impact cyclists. Now, right now we are standing on Cambridge Street. Can anyone in the crowd just shout it out if you know, why is it called Cambridge Street? Because it goes to Cambridge, that is correct. We are very creative here in Boston. Now, what's special about Cambridge Street? Cambridge Street has quick build bike lanes. So this bike lane you just rode in on was built very recently, last couple of years. Now, quick build bike lanes, what does that mean? It means that you don't really move curbs, you don't really change signals too much, you're mostly working with paint and these lovely plastic bollards, and maybe you alter the signal timings a little bit, but not much physical infrastructure. Now, what's good about this? They're very cheap, fast, and relatively easy to install. As you can see, it's pretty new. It's pretty low impact in terms of the street environment, but it does come with some serious downsides. Number one, it doesn't offer much physical protection. And number two, you have to make some pretty serious compromises. Cities are generally pretty opposed to massive changes all at one time. Incremental progress is very often the way to go, which is no more evident than right here, where the bike lane with bollard protection turns into a right turn lane. So what do you do if you're a bike? Well, you merge with traffic, the traffic that the bike lane is supposed to help you avoid. Now, why does this happen? Because some traffic engineer somewhere realized that if you got rid of this lane, then it would impact the signal and there would be too much traffic and people would complain, and then, people would complain to their politicians and, give bike lanes a bad light, blah, 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 whatever. Bike lanes, quick build bike lanes, gotta make compromises. And nowhere else is that more evident than the other side of the street. So while this side of the street of Cambridge Street does have protected bike lanes, the other side has absolutely nothing. Now, like I said, this street goes to Cambridge. This is one of the few streets in Boston that actually connects places and isn't just a mess of spaghetti that dead ends in one-ways and whatnot. So this is a major commuter thoroughfare for transit riders, cyclists, people walking, and people driving. So why don't we have a bike lane in the other direction? Well, since it's quick build and the city doesn't have the budget or political capital to actually move any curbs, they're extremely constrained in the amount of width that they have to work with. And as such, they cannot justifiably squeeze in a bike lane because some of the sections of curb are only 20 feet wide, which is barely wide enough for 2 lanes of cars. So fitting in a bike lane, unfortunately, not gonna happen. So we are going to continue down Cambridge Street and we are going to go across the Longfellow Bridge. Longfellow Bridge, one of the prettiest bridges in Boston, featured prominently in Good Will Hunting. And it does have a bit of an incline, so make sure to downshift your bikes on the way up. But it also has protected bike lanes. Now the Longfellow Bridge was recently, last 10 years, restored. And part of the question of rebuilding large sections of the bridge is, are we gonna put in bike lanes or not? And there was a bit of a compromise that was reached. Yes, they did put in bike lanes. They are nice and lovely and wide, but they are not curb separated. They are still separated from cars via plastic posts. I don't know the full history of this one. It might have something to do with emergency vehicles. Do you know this one, Chris?
Well, the bridge took many years to redesign and rebuild, probably a decade or more. Over the course of that time, the greater Boston region sort of understood that it wanted to add more bicycle infrastructure. So at the start of that process, bike lanes were not on anybody's mind or on the minds of too few people. By the end of that process, bicycle infrastructure had become really a necessity in any new infrastructure. So it became a retrofit, but a retrofit that advocates like Peter, who's here, pushed very hard for, and we were successful at making it happen with agreement from a Republican, relatively conservative governor who had to have the case made to him, but he agreed to it in the end. So it's not perfect. We'd much rather have more protection, but much better than what was designed before that. When we go over the Longfellow, you're going to hopefully notice that there's also a subway line in the middle of the Longfellow Bridge. That's the red line connecting Boston and Cambridge. That subway line carries over 100,000 people a day. The story behind that line is that when the Massachusetts legislature in the 1890s commissioned money, bond money, to rebuild that bridge, they had this idea that they wanted to save some space for this newfangled technology called the subway. So they actually wrote into the legislation, build the bridge wider than it needs to be because we think there might need to be a train over this bridge in the future. They did that, and that bridge, again, now carries 100,000 people a day. It's been in place for over 100 years. It's a great example of how good design and forward-thinking investment in infrastructure can pay off in the future. The existence of that subway line, the red line, connecting Boston to Cambridge, really was essential and absolutely necessary for the creation of Kendall Square, which is the cluster of life science and biotechnology that grew out of Harvard and especially MIT, which is also in Kendall Square. Kendall Square would not exist without that infrastructure investment. And Kendall Square is one of the 2 or 3 places in the world that invented the COVID vaccine. Moderna is based in Cambridge and invented mRNA technology there. So we like to think that like 120 years ago, people thinking about infrastructure investment led to saving millions of lives around the world because we were able to create that technology cluster there. Again, just an example of how when we're making the case about investment in infrastructure, we got to think on really long timelines. All right, let's get back on.
Yep.
I just want to add something real quick. So we have a lot of good network around here. Hi, I'm Peter Cheung, by the way, sorry. A lot of good network here around, bicycle network here in Boston. But right here where we're standing is a spot where the Connect Historic Boston, which is a beautiful 2-directional bike lane that comes up all the way around the waterfront, but it ends right here. It hasn't been, okay, so basically it feeds you over here and you're on your own. So it's a perfect example of where you have your high stress area right next to your low stress area, and then you'll find that all around the city. And that's one of the things that we're working on, is trying to connect those connections. And you're at one of the major intersections, right, that happens. If you look down Stanford Street, there's a beautiful two-way bike lane going all the way down towards the waterfront.
Rolling out.
So we're still on Cambridge Street, again, that dividing line between the West End and Mass General Hospital on our right and Beacon Hill on our left. Beacon Hill is a fabulous place to live. Old 18th and 19th century brick buildings, townhouses, very walkable, narrow streets, good trees. This building on the right is the Liberty Hotel. Yes, it is an old jail from the 19th century. It's Liberty Hotel. Play on words with jail. So this is the Longfellow Bridge that we're about to go over. This is one of the red line stations that I was talking about. Right here. Say that again. Yeah, this is really awesome. Here in the region. Cambridge. Hey. Yeah, totally the right thing to do, the right investment. So you can see in Cambridge, we've already got some higher quality bicycle infrastructure here with parking, separated bike lane, actually parking and plastic delineators. Yeah. They put some thought into even the turning lane here for bikes. So we're really in sort of the heart, or at least close to the heart of Kendall Square, what we like to think of as the most important center of biotechnology in the entire country, right next to MIT and all the research that goes on there. It also has a transportation history. Up on our right here is the Volpe Center, named after John Volpe, the first Secretary of Transportation in the country's history. And that is a federal transportation research institute that was located here at a very different time in Kendall Square's history, when Kendall Square was kind of run down, a lot of the traditional industry had left, and they needed some federal investment just to keep some jobs here. Over the course of the next 50 or 60 years, Kendall Square was transformed into a huge job center, tens of thousands of new jobs, mostly in biotech and research, lots of lab space. And as I mentioned earlier, this is one of the 2 or 3 places in the world that invented the COVID vaccine. If you heard of the Moderna vaccine, Moderna comes out of Kendall Square, still has its headquarters here and does all of its research here. So we're very proud of that history of research and discovery that has a long history in Kendall Square. This is new and may even be a temporary condition given the construction that we're passing on my right here. Yeah. So I think this is in place for maybe a year or two as this construction goes forward, and then the lane maybe moves back to the right side of the street. Not sure about that. Yeah. What it is, if I am right though about that, it's a great example of Cambridge taking its bicycle infrastructure that seriously. That even when there's a construction project, they make sure that there's a safe cycling route and alternative. They put that as one of the primary requirements of any sort of construction plan. Not every community would do that. Cambridge takes its cycling very seriously. It's an important front of mind political matter for the city council and the city manager. And the results are this great infrastructure that we're biking on right now. We're joined today by a number of luminaries in Greater Boston's bicycle and streets advocacy. You've all met Peter, of course, a hero of mine and many people here. Earlier, we didn't point out, we should have Mark Chase, who is also a longtime friend and advocate and ally in our world. He runs Neighborways. Mark is technically on the tour with you, but really should be on our side leading the tour because he knows as much as anybody. And I want to introduce a new face and name to our tour, Jeff Rosenblum. Jeff, come on over. Jeff is amazing and the founder of Livable Streets, which is probably our most essential streets advocacy organization in Greater Boston. Jeff founded it probably 20 years ago now, and it's had an amazing impact on the region. Jeff knows everything there is to know about all the lanes, especially in Cambridge and Somerville, but just another good friend and ally.
All right, so you may all be wondering, why do I have you stopped in this beautiful construction site? Well, that's because we are here to talk about TMPs, Traffic Management Plans. Yay, round of applause. All right, so as Chris established, Kendall, a lot of biotech, a lot of businesses, a lot of jobs, tons of development. Now, when you have development, which is what you want, you'll often have impacts to the street network. As you can see, we have an entire half of the street closed to traffic. Now, as you also experience, this street is the main way to get from Cambridge into downtown Boston. So if you lose a couple lanes, how do you accommodate bikes? Well, it's pretty easy. You turn a one-way bike lane into a two-lane bike lane with a little bit of paint, a little bit of concrete barriers, and literally overnight, we accommodated bikes through this construction site. Now, why is this important? Well, biking is great and all if it works for your commute, but what's also super important is knowing that it's a reliable way to get where you're going. And if one day you're going on a bike ride to get to your work and you encounter a construction site and you're thrown into 50-mile-an-hour traffic with no other option, maybe you just call in a sick day, you know? But this sort of forward thinking and planning and forcing the developers to actually accommodate for cyclists really is invaluable for encouraging cycling in the area.
All right, a couple other tidbits. First of all, this is the Volpe Center, Transportation Center. For those that don't know, this was supposed to be Houston, and then a politician said they wanted it in Texas. This was supposed to be the control center for NASA. An important piece of legislation that Cambridge passed as a policy in the 90s was called the Cambridge Parking and Transportation Demand Management Ordinance. It's incredibly important because it's really a U.S. model for how to reduce single occupancy vehicle trips from development. And the reason that this is important in this area is you're going to see a very kind of stark change when we start moving up into more residential. This was all industrial, so it had a lot of development opportunity. Cambridge passed an ordinance that required developers to have a maximum of 45% driving to work. And it was passed in a way that it was enforceable with teeth. So a parking and transportation demand management officer was hired to make sure that these developments all had a maximum of 45%. Each development was required to report on an annual basis after it was developed to confirm that they were meeting that requirement. And overall, the single occupancy vehicle trips in this entire development area was 40%. Why was it 40? Because everyone was so scared that they weren't going to meet the 45 that they shot lower. So it is evidence that that kind of program can work. It took a while, which was really the political part of it, is you pass an ordinance and all the developers are like, you're going to kill us, we're going to have no development, everything's going to fail. It really took 15 years, 20 years until the first development series was built, and we measured traffic. I used to work for the city of Cambridge. We measured traffic and found that there was no increase in traffic with all the development that happened in Kendall Square. Even to the point where, as Ben pointed out, we can have more development and close a two-way street to one direction of traffic. So that's just a little background on that important ordinance. Other places have recommendations, but they have no teeth to enforce it. And so that's really the difference with the city of Cambridge.
Yeah, so the question is, once the construction's done, will the developer need to revert this back? Yes, this is a temporary adjustment to the traffic network.
So all the construction that you're seeing here in Kendall is really representative of the last 20, 25 years of this neighborhood. There's always something under construction, always something being built. And Jeff made this point in the prior stop, but it's worth restating. This is a neighborhood that has added tens of thousands of jobs in the last 20 years without a net increase in the number of vehicles driving to the neighborhood. So the city has done a tremendous job of managing the demand for single occupancy vehicles, providing alternatives, requiring transit, encouraging programs like pay by day parking instead of people having a monthly pass, which just gives them an incentive to drive more. They've really used every tool in the toolbox and shown great success. They have proven that you can have growth and development without necessarily bringing all of the cars and the traffic with it. Now, look, this is a community built around the MBTA's Red Line subway line. Not every community in the state or the country has that asset, but the principle is still the same, that if you put the right policies in place, you can get that kind of growth without the traffic. It's certainly not unanimous in this community that the city needs more bicycle infrastructure. There are folks that think that things are moving too quickly. And Cambridge has a somewhat unique form of government in that the city council is elected every 2 years by ranked choice voting. It's a complicated electoral system, but one that works well for the community. And it is true that in some of those election cycles, pro-bike candidates have not been the majority. And there have been periods where the progress has slowed. And I think, in fact, in this current session, it's a close vote, but a small minority, or just by a small amount, a minority of Cambridge councilors are part of what you might call the pro-bike coalition. In general, over the last 15 or 20 years, though, it's been a majority of voices, and that's the result of great political organizing by people that have been on the ground and fighting for that kind of change. And then I also think that the momentum has really built so that more and more people in Cambridge are buying bikes, they're planning their lives around bikes. It's fair to say that Cambridge and Somerville are the cargo bike capitals of New England. Lots of families that put their kids in a bucket bike, and take them to preschool or school every day. And as you see more of that, the coalition just grows and gets stronger, and it continues the momentum in the community for even more bicycle infrastructure. It's more and more voters every day realizing the value of having good infrastructure in their neighborhoods.
And we're looking at some of this infrastructure right here. This is world class right here in terms of a tree lines, raised and separated piece of infrastructure. This reminds me a little bit of Western Avenue here, which we may see today. This is fantastic.
This is great, and this is really now standard for a new street and a new development in Cambridge. I don't know the exact year on this building, but it's certainly within the last 5 or 6 years. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that the city required this infrastructure to be built as this building was coming in. But it's not just a great piece of infrastructure, it's a beautiful piece of infrastructure as well for the neighborhood. Yeah. With lots of plants, great shade from the trees. You can see a bus stop up there as well, kind of well designated and delineated. So this is absolutely world class, and it's the kind of infrastructure that more neighborhoods deserve.
Yeah, and we're rolling past a linear rail line here, rail width trail as well. So talk a little bit about how the framing of what this infrastructure is. It's not really about bikes. This is about creating mobility options and choices for everybody, no matter how they get along, and creating safer environments. How successful has the city and the advocates been communicating that this isn't about cyclist infrastructure, this is about options for everyday people to have to get around?
That's exactly right, and they've really emphasized the safety message, not just for cyclists, but for anybody using the road. There's been a great push for traffic calming, slower speeds. Not every street is a street that necessarily needs a bike lane if there is a slow enough speed on that street that there's not going to be conflict and danger between pedestrians, cyclists, and drivers. And so that's part of the network as well, is slow neighborhood streets that people feel comfortable biking on no matter what age they are.
Right.
But the advocacy has been really thoughtful over the years, and led by great people like Jeff, who you heard from earlier. and you can really see the results on the ground because of it.
All right, here we are. We are in Cambridge, Massachusetts. We've got our big line of bikes. And oh, look who we have here. Lucy, thank you so much for helping lead this fabulous tour for CNU. Please introduce yourself.
I'm Lucy Gibson. I am a transportation engineer with Toole Design. And I've been at Toole Design about 6 years, but I've been doing this kind of work for over 30.
Over 30,
40 years.
30, 40
I have
years.
a lot of gray hair.
Yeah, me too. I
battle
joke,
stories and scars.
I joke and say, yeah, I've been in the game here for 35 years now, and it's so encouraging to see such progress happening in the area of creating more livable communities, more active mobility infrastructure going in. We saw some pretty amazing stuff in the actual city center of Boston. We're now, as we mentioned earlier, in Cambridge, and it's been wonderful taking a look at that. Talk a little bit about the role that Toole Design has here in the Boston region and the type of projects that you guys have been working on.
So Toole Design was started in Washington, D.C. area with the first office, but the second office was Boston. And I don't know the exact year, but it's over 10 years ago that the office founded here. That Nick Jackson, who was a bike advocate from Chicago and came to Boston and then started the branch. He just recently retired.
Yeah.
But Boston's trajectory on bike infrastructure very much parallels Toole, moving into the city, developing a practice on designing state-of-the-art, world-class bike infrastructure, safe streets, and it was just perfectly aligned with the growth of the infrastructure that the whole region was seeing, especially Boston, but we do a lot of work in Cambridge and Somerville, which are all on different points on their journey to building out good bike networks.
That's right.
And safe street, and much more than biking, it's walking
and that's
transit.
the whole point, is I like to emphasize on the Active Towns channel that this infrastructure is not about bikes. This is about creating more people-oriented places, bringing the volume and the speed of traffic down, motor vehicle traffic, and really, enhancing the livability of the place.
Absolutely, and Kendall Square is a great example of where all the kinds of investments and decisions that are made to focus on safe streets and focus on multimodal transportation has come into fruition, where we have a ton of development. And some of the most valuable real estate in the Boston region is right here in Kendall Square. But people are arriving by transit, by bike, by foot, or they live nearby and they can have a lot of options of how to get here. So it's a very different development trajectory than other places, and it's really working. It's really desirable place to live, work, and
I like that word options too, because that's what this is all about. It's not a war on cars. We're talking about creating options for people to have mobility choice, and really trying to make it truly safe and inviting for all ages and abilities.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's the vehicular cycling environment that Boston had prior to 20 years ago was just not for everybody. And the vision of a bike network that provides choices and mobility that's sort of scaled to the urban environment, that's comfortable and safe, and that you don't feel like you're taking your life in your hand. It works. People choose that once that's an option.
Yeah. And Chris was saying too, it's Cambridge is starting to be known as like a cargo bike capital for all of the parents, taking their little ones, the little itty bitty ones. And so that's like an indicator species. The other indicator species is when we see more of the children, especially the tweens, getting around on their own, and then also the elderly, when we see more and more people who are kind of looking like you and me with the gray hair out and about, getting around, running some of their daily errands. I mean, this is like it's an indication that we're starting to see the improvement of the environment so that it's safer for everybody, all ages and abilities.
Absolutely. And there's a critical amount of the network you need to be in place for people to start feeling comfortable making that place, and maybe investing in an e-bike, or rearranging their life that they can bike for transportation, because it does take a reorientation. But we're seeing it happen, people making that choice.
Yeah.
And
Again, well, thank you so much for helping organize and leading this ride here for CNU. And thank you also to Toole Design Group for sponsoring the Strong Towns National Gathering. I've been hanging out with a whole bunch of the Toole Design folks. In fact, we had a nice walking infrastructure tour in the city of Providence yesterday. So we had Jason there leading the tour, and it was fantastic. Again, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, folks, we are going to roll out to Inman Square. Follow me, walk your bikes until we get to the street, please.
All right, Jeff, I'm going to stage up on your left here.
Wow, how innovative, getting to ride side by side with somebody.
Yeah, imagine that.
It's only been the last couple years with these kind of bike lanes that you're allowed to do that.
Exactly. Jeff, why don't you introduce yourself?
Okay, my name is Jeff Rosenblum. I'm a transportation planner and engineer. Co-founded an organization in Boston called Livable Streets Alliance. Worked for the city of Cambridge for a while. Then went to MIT and worked for consulting, and co-teach a class in the Netherlands over the summer with a bunch of Northeastern University undergraduate engineers.
Yeah. I probably have seen some of your folks over there.
And Ben, who's leading the tour, is a former alum of that program.
Yeah, yeah. Fantastic. Isn't there another professor involved?
Yes. I sort of help.
Yes.
Professor Firth is the primary professor.
Yeah. I ran into your group in Utrecht last year.
Oh, right.
Yes.
Okay.
I was filming over there.
I was not there that day.
We
Indeed.
were.
Okay.
I was out and about with another friend and colleague who lives in Amsterdam, but you all were out with our good friend, the Utrecht city staff member, Herbert Tiemens.
Yes.
That day. So yeah, fantastic. Well, talk a little bit about what we're rolling through here, and tell a little bit of the story of Cambridge and Somerville and how things have been improving over the decades.
Well, I can primarily talk about Cambridge. One of the things that Cambridge did early on in the 90s, when there was pressure from the Clean Air Act to clean up air pollution, was to pass a vehicle trip reduction ordinance that sort of led the way for starting a bike program, a pedestrian program, and kind of launch the prelude to what everybody's seeing here today. Yeah. And one of the things that happened through that program, first, before putting in any kind of bike infrastructure at all, was traffic calming. Traffic calming, just one of the things that we learned from Europe, is the most important thing to start with when you're thinking about livable streets, and then think about infrastructure. Yeah. So
and to emphasize that point, I mean, people are shocked when I say that, you know, everybody thinks of the Netherlands as being, you know, the protected and separated infrastructure, and that's true to some extent on the busier streets that exist, but the reality is 60 to 70% of the bicycle network is actually forms of shared space, which only can happen because it's traffic calmed.
Right. The philosophy there is share when possible, separate when necessary.
Yeah, exactly. So. Exactly. Yeah, so it's really been exciting to see the transformation, the evolution, you know, that's been happening here. I think that Cambridge is one of our most wonderful North American, you know, stars in terms of being able to look to. Yeah, it's not perfect. We know that. There is no such thing as a perfect city. Not even Utrecht is perfect. But from a North American perspective, a great example to say that yes, in North America, yes, in the United States, we can make a difference. We can start to create streets that are more livable, streets that are for people.
Yeah, I think one thing that people, especially in other cities that want to try to emulate what Cambridge has done, need to really understand, and advocates also, is that it is a process.
Right.
Cambridge would not have started with protected bike lanes. Cambridge started with regular bike lanes to get people biking and to get people comfortable with it, even if European-style bike lanes were always part of the original vision.
Right.
And so, one question that some people have is it possible for some cities to leapfrog over that stage of doing bike lanes?
Yeah.
I think that with the change of the design guides to allow protected bike lanes to even be legal in the United States per design guides,
Right.
and the number of cities that are doing it, and the decline of vehicular cycling leads to the possibility for that.
Yeah, for sure. And we recently saw the retirement of Kara Siderman, and she was with the city for many years, and a good part of
35.
35, and a good part of the inspiration, for the city was, what she would experience on a regular basis there in Denmark, in Copenhagen.
Correct.
Yeah.
So the influence started in the 80s.
Yeah. Now we're a pretty special place here. Let's talk about this pretty fun and funky place.
So most of what you see in Cambridge is quick build infrastructure, so taking existing curb lines and just putting in flex posts and paint to change the design and move parking. This is one of the few fully reconstructed, incredibly expensive, but it had to be done anyway, so if you have to dig it up, you might as well put it back better than you found it to start with. So this really does feel like a place that you'd see in Copenhagen or in the Netherlands.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, we're pulling up to our next stop.
So we're in Inman Square, but before we do that, I just want to talk a little bit about Cambridge. And one of the things, so I have two kids who are 16 and 14, and so have been somewhat influenced by them. And so I came up with a presentation that I give called the Eras Tour of Cambridge. So thinking back to how Cambridge got to where they were, there's a couple stages. First, I call it the sort of the initial stage in the 80s and 90s when the Clean Air Act was pressuring cities to clean up transportation. The city of Cambridge passed an ordinance called the part of the transportation, the trip reduction ordinance. And the purpose of that ordinance created the bike committee, the pedestrian committee, and required the city to start thinking about redesigning streets and the street network, and really started the traffic calming. So a lot of things happened in the 90s. In Central Square, that was probably the biggest main project, but not a lot happened with infrastructure. It really started with traffic calming, and even in the early 2000s. The next stage was to start putting in infrastructure where you could. And for people that are advocates or work for cities, sometimes it's frustrating when you can only put a bike lane in for a stretch and then you get yelled at for saying it doesn't connect to anything, but you have to get started somewhere. So that was the next stage of what Cambridge did. And finally, the stage after that was protected bike infrastructure. Now, how did this happen? Part of it is, as we know, as planners, that it was illegal to build protected bike lanes. The city of Cambridge collaborated with MIT and built a protected bike lane in the 2000s only because the land was owned by MIT and the city only took over the land afterwards, and it was all part of the plan. But the city wouldn't have been permitted to build a protected bike lane in the early 2000s. It was against the guidelines. So now that that's changed, the question is, what happens next? So one of the things that happened in Cambridge is put together a bike plan, a robust bike plan that said if we were to really build a European-style bike network in Cambridge and think ahead 30 years, what would that look like? That's what the bike plan said. Now, anybody who's a planner or an engineer or an advocate knows that just by putting the stuff on paper doesn't mean it's going to happen. So this bike plan looked great. A bunch of advocates got together in Cambridge and said, This happened after 4 or 5 people got killed in a 2-year time period in Cambridge, and said, we've got to do something about this, and we've got to do something about it faster. So these people got together and said, the avenue we're going to take is to come up with an ordinance, and we're going to try to get people elected to city council to pass this ordinance. This was all planned before getting these people elected. And they said, do you sign on to this platform that says you're going to pass this ordinance if you get elected, and we're going to help you get elected? So a bunch of city councilors signed on, potential city councilors signed on to this platform. This platform got elected and then passed the ordinance. What the ordinance said is, we're city councilors, we're not professionals, we don't know how to design bike networks. The city employees who are professionals, they did all the designs. The design is there. We're not telling you what you should build. All we're gonna do is tell you that you have to build one of these every year by ordinance. So the innovation of the cycling safety ordinance was not saying what the bike network should look like, but saying the professionals that came up with the network, we're going to tell you in 2019 you have to do this street, in 2020 you have to do this street, in 2021. So in the last 5 years, that's the reason why I can bike pretty much from my house on one end of Cambridge all the way to my kids' school on the other end of Cambridge, primarily on separated, protected bike lanes. This is not something anyone could have imagined even like 5 years ago. So that's how that ordinance came to be. Now, from a city perspective, the city staff then said, and this I'm no longer working for the city, but the city staff said, well, we have to do this. Whether we take out, because a lot of it, the reason why we couldn't do it earlier is that you had to take out parking or you had to take out a travel lane, and that obviously is a lot of public opposition to that, even in the city of Cambridge. So the only way Cambridge was able to follow that timeline was to do quick build. So what we're seeing here is a full reconstruction. So this is something that you'd see like in Europe. My kids, when they bike through, they're like, oh, this is just like in the Netherlands. So this is really amazing. It took a lot of design and planning to try to make this work. But one thing to point out is that there is a fire station right in the middle of it, and it still functions. So that's a sort of an important piece of safety. A lot of opposition comes from the fire department, police, and emergency response to these sorts of things. So the only way to get this infrastructure built is to do quick build. So just paint and posts. So what we're going to see biking up the next stretch is just paint and posts. Some people, when they bike along it and then they have to go around the curb extensions that used to be there because that was where the pedestrians were supposed to come out, people come to the city and they're like, are you people stupid or crazy? Why did you build it this way? And of course, it wasn't built that way. This was a retrofit. So a lot of the path from getting to point A to point B involves these interim steps. And that's what we're going to see on this next stretch. All right, so a couple things. One is this intersection used to be mostly asphalt. And the reason is when you have a shape that is not a plus sign, if you don't have streets crossing exactly perpendicular to each other and they're on an angle, it means that there's just all this extra space. So this was all asphalt. And cars were allowed to go in all different directions, and it was complicated, and bikes, it was the absolute worst place to bike. So this was definitely identified as the worst pinch point for biking. Meanwhile, this street that goes up to Somerville was at one point the highest ridership bike route, to the point where during rush hour you'd have to wait multiple light cycles as a cyclist to get through the light at some of these places. So to have that major bike corridor go through this intersection in its previous state was just not tenable. So that was the kind of inspiration for why this came to be. I guess a key thing is looking, one of the things that Cambridge has done, which a lot of suburbs have done already, so you're like, oh, Cambridge is copying the suburbs, is having special turn lanes that turn green only for the turns. Now, usually you see those for left turns, but you'll notice that in Cambridge, there is a significant number of right turn arrows. Why is that? It's so that the bikes can stay hugging the curb in a protected bike lane, and when the cars are going straight, the bikes can go straight, and the right turn lane has to wait. That is a really, really important part of the signal timing. Now, that requires you to have a physical space available for that right turn, and therefore reduces the number of lanes that you can use as through. So there's one lane that comes through, and then one lane can turn right. That one has a separate signal than the lane is going to go straight. So that reduced the amount of capacity that the intersection could handle, and that was what the controversy was in the design, and that was the struggle to try to make all the light signals work. I think about 5 different consulting firms all worked on this together, which was good to get the competing consulting firms all collaborating on this. Toole Design is one of them. But it was pretty complicated to figure out both the geometry and the timing. And that's another key piece to this. A lot of people think this is all just about geometric design. If you just put the bike lane in the right place, it'll all work. No, signal timing and the time aspect of these designs is really, really critical. The bicycle signal on the light, yes, 3 years ago that was illegal, now it's legal. In essence, it helps cyclists know when they're allowed to go, because if you have cars that are going straight here, they're going to get a green light. And then if you have cars making a right turn here and they have a red arrow, what happens to the cyclists over here? What are they supposed to be looking at to know whether they go? So they have a special signal that is just for them, so they know when to go. And so that's an example of that. So that signal right over there, I'm trying to point and talk at the same time in this thing. The signal over there, in essence, allows the bikes to go while the cars who are turning right have to wait with their red arrow.
Hey everyone, this is as good a place as any to bring part 1 of our CNU bike tour of Boston and Cambridge to a close. Hey, if you've enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, and share it with a friend. And if you haven't done so already, I'd be honored to have you subscribe to the channel. Just click on that subscription button down below and ring that notifications bell. And come back for part 2. We're going to be looking at some other really cool stuff, including going on to the Harvard University campus. Hey, and if you're enjoying this content here on the Active Towns channel, please consider supporting my efforts by becoming an Active Towns ambassador. Hey, it's super easy to do. Just click on the join button right here in YouTube or navigate over to activetowns.org. Click on the support tab at the top of the page, and there's several different options, including becoming a Patreon supporter. Hey, patrons do get early and ad-free access to all this video content. And you know what? You can also make a donation to the nonprofit. Again, thank you all so much. I really do appreciate you tuning in today. And until next time, this is John signing off by wishing you much activity, health, and happiness. Cheers. And I must send a big shout out to all my Active Towns ambassadors supporting the channel financially via YouTube Super Thanks, YouTube memberships, Buy Me a Coffee, Patreon, making donations to the nonprofit, and hey, also providing me with homestays when I'm out on the road. Hey, every little bit really does add up, and I really do appreciate it. I simply could not do this without your support. Again, thank you all so very much.